British Columbia stretches across nearly 1 million square kilometers of coastline, canyon, and mountain range. Canada is the second largest country on Earth, but most people only see Toronto, Vancouver, and a handful of national parks. They drive past the logging roads and the coastal inlets without knowing what is hiding at the end of them. They miss the forgotten experiments. They miss places like a perfectly preserved ghost town where every light is still on but no one has lived there for over 40 years. They miss an entire gold mining operation dangling precariously on the side of a sheer mountain cliff. They miss a Victorian-era cannery capital being physically swallowed by the mud of a river estuary. We're going to look at 10 of these places. That perfectly preserved town is number 1 on this list, and trust me, you are going to want to stick around for it. These are the 10 places in British Columbia that Google Maps is hiding from you. Let's go! Number 10. Sointula. The forgotten Finnish utopia. You can only get here by taking a 25-minute government car ferry from the northern Vancouver Island town of Port McNeill. You cross the turbulent waters of the Queen Charlotte Strait, listening to the calls of returning orcas on the rubbing beaches, and arrive at Malcolm Island. It is a coastal temperate rainforest enveloped in the lush, rainy, and foggy weather typical of the Pacific Northwest. At the dawn of the 20th century, Finnish immigrants laboring in the brutal coal mines of Vancouver Island desperately wanted a better life. They summoned a Finnish writer and activist named Matti Kurikka to lead them. The goal was to create an entirely self-sustaining cooperative society based on socialist ideals and equal rights for women. The provincial government granted them Malcolm Island in 1901. They called it Sointula, which translates to Place of Harmony in Finnish. They formed the Kalevan Kansa Colonization Company. But utopia is hard to build in the wilderness. The harsh conditions and massive debt took a toll. Then, a devastating fire in 1903 destroyed the communal hall and killed 11 people. The socialist utopian project officially collapsed by 1905. Here's the thing. Despite the collapse of the original socialist experiment over a century ago, the town's fiercely independent cooperative spirit survived, and you can still find Finnish-inspired architecture, saunas, and bilingual signage scattered across the island today. The town is alive and well, though shrinking. It is an unincorporated village with no local mayor or police force. Visitors can see the original Finnish Order Hall. They can explore the Sointula Museum, which features a 100-year-old painted revolutionary banner. You can even eat traditional Finnish pastries and shop at the oldest continuously operating cooperative store in Western Canada, established in 1909. Utopia failed, but the people decided they liked the island anyway. Number 9. Hedley Mascot Gold Mine. The mine in the sky. The Similkameen Valley is steep and rugged, defined by arid Rocky Mountain terrain. The winds howl up the valley, sweeping up the cliff face. In the 1930s, the Hedley Mascot Gold Mines Company purchased a tiny wedge-shaped claim called the Mascot Fraction. There was just one problem. The claim was wedged on a cliff face 300 feet above the valley floor of Nickel Plate Mountain. Standard mining infrastructure was completely useless here. Ground transportation was impossible, so they built their entire operation literally clinging to the cliffs. Cookhouses, mechanical shops, and bunkhouses were constructed directly onto the precipitous crags surrounding the mine portal. To access the site, an elaborate aerial tramway was constructed to haul men and materials up the cliff. Miners rode this massive tramway to get to work every day, creating a surreal city in the sky. During its 13-year lifespan, the mine extracted 8 tons of gold from 682,000 tons of ore. It was a harsh place to live. The area is prone to freezing winters. Historically, ice on the river forced the mine's power plant to shut down entirely during colder months. To access the main portal, modern visitors had to descend a wooden stairway with 500 steps, built directly into the side of the mountain, offering terrifying, vertigo-inducing views of the Similkameen Valley. The wooden buildings still cling to the cliff today, creaking in midair. In 1990, the NDP provincial government bought the historic buildings to save them from being burned down, later converting the site into a tourism destination. The site was restored as a heritage museum. Currently, physical tours of the mine are closed for overdue structural and security renovations, meaning you cannot take the bus up the steep winding access road right now. You have to view the history from the valley floor and the Hedley Museum. It is a monument to how far people will go and how high they will climb just to dig a hole. Number 8. Sandon, the ghost town transit hub. Wandering through a remote mountain valley 700 kilometers from the coast, you will suddenly find yourself surrounded by vintage city buses that still display Vancouver street names on their destination rolls. This is deep in the Kootenay Mountains. It is a narrow, heavily forested mountain valley cut by Carpenter Creek. Sandon was incorporated in 1898 during a massive silver rush in the Silvery Slocan region. Today, it is a decaying 19th century silver mining ghost town. It is perfectly silent, broken only by the rushing creek and the hum of an operational 1890s hydroelectric plant. For 40 years, Brill trolley buses powered Vancouver's transit system. They were decommissioned in the 1980s. Transit enthusiasts feared these historical vehicles would be stripped for parts and copper by vandals in the city. They needed a safe place. They chose a ghost town at the end of a winding dirt road deep in the backcountry of the Selkirk Mountains. In the early 2000s, they moved a collection of retired Brill trolley buses from Vancouver, Calgary, and Saskatoon to Sandon. The plan was for the ghost town to serve as a halfway house until the buses could be refurbished. Instead, funding never materialized. The fleet was left to rot alongside the 1890s mining ruins. Deep winter snowpack in the Kootenay Mountains contributes to the rapid rusting and decay of the vehicles. Most of the buses are now over 90% worn out. They sit abandoned in the mountain wilderness. The buses still bear their original city transit signs, such as Granville, Broadway, and Maine. The Silversmith Power and Light hydroelectric station built during the boom years still operates. A restored mercantile block houses the Sandon Historical Society Museum. The contrast is jarring. Mid-20th century urban transit sinking into the dirt next to 19th century wooden mining structures. The buses waited for a rescue that never came. Number 7. Bradian, the town cheaper than a condo. During the mid-20th century, the Bridge River Valley was a booming gold mining hub. Bradian was built in the 1930s as an idyllic residential suburb for the workers of the neighboring Bralorne gold mine community. It sits in a high-altitude mountain valley surrounded by deep alpine forests. The snow falls heavily here, making it highly attractive to snowmobilers and backcountry skiers today. But the town itself is defined by an eerie suburban stillness. It looks like a neighborhood where everyone simply vanished mid-afternoon. When the gold ran out and the mine shuttered in 1971, everyone packed up and left. They left behind a perfectly intact neighborhood to gather dust in the mountains. For over a decade, it sat completely abandoned. Then, in 1997, it was purchased by a family who used the entire 50-acre town as their extreme private summer retreat. They played in a ghost town. In late 2014, the family put it on the real estate market. It caught the eye of a Chinese development group, the China Zhongya Group Hebei Canada China Co., who were looking to turn the abandoned enclave into a winter sports resort. For less than $1 million Canadian, a price that barely buys a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Vancouver today, the buyers acquired 50 acres of land, 22 houses, and their very own municipal grid, complete with fire hydrants. The sale price was close to the asking price of $995,000. The sale included 22 intact houses, streets, vacant lots, and telephone lines. It is accessible via rugged mountain roads north of Whistler, which can be treacherous or impassable in winter without proper gear. Redevelopment plans have been slow. The 22 homes, streets, and fire hydrants remain standing. It largely remains an empty, privately owned ghost town. Entire streets are waiting for a single car to drive by. Number 6. Tranquille Sanatorium, the city of the sick. In the early 1900s, tuberculosis was a death sentence. The uninfected public was terrified of it. They called it the White Plague. To isolate patients, the government built Tranquille in 1907. They placed it in a remote area on flat agricultural land at the edge of Kamloops Lake, surrounded by dry, rolling sagebrush hills. They chose this location because the dry Kamloops climate was believed to aid recovery. To avoid contact with the terrified local townspeople, the facility was forced to become an entirely self-sufficient city, so patients never had to leave. They had their own fire department, farm, steam plant, and schools. They raised their own livestock and grew their own crops. The weather here is extreme, blisteringly hot, dry summers, and bitterly cold, windswept winters. To manage the harsh winter weather, they built a vast subterranean tunnel network. An extensive underground tunnel system connected the buildings, allowing staff to invisibly transport food, laundry, and patients. The facility was converted into a psychiatric hospital in 1958 and officially closed in 1983. In the 1990s, an Italian developer bought the land and renamed it Padova City, though redevelopment stalled. You reach it by taking a lonely drive down Tranquille Road, moving away from the city of Kamloops into wide-open agricultural land. The massive hospital buildings and tunnels remain today, heavily decaying and fenced off. The surrounding fertile lands are used for agriculture, operating as Tranquille Farm Fresh. The underground tunnel system is so extensive and deeply unsettling that in recent years, local theater groups have used the pitch-black corridors to host interactive theatrical haunted house events. You can hear the wind rattling through broken hospital windows. The site occasionally hosts tours, escape rooms, or film crews. It was built to keep people in, and now it is fenced off to keep people out. If you are enjoying this so far, drop a comment on which of these towns surprises you most. Number 5. Port Essington. The town swallowed by mud. Unlike traditional ghost towns that leave behind stone ruins or sun-baked wood, Port Essington is a wet ghost town. Its Victorian bones have literally been sucked down into the tidal mudflats, slowly erasing it from the earth. Flatland is almost non-existent on the rugged British Columbia coastline. When settlers arrived in 1871, they built the town straight out over the water on thousands of wooden pilings. It sat over the tidal mudflats of the massive Skeena River estuary, bordered by steep, forested mountains. In the late 1800s, salmon was gold on the west coast, and Port Essington was the undisputed capital of the Skeena River. It was once the largest settlement on the north coast. It served as a massive, multi-ethnic hub for the coastal salmon canning industry. Indigenous workers, Japanese fishermen, and European managers all lived and worked there. Access to the town in its prime was entirely reliant on treacherous steamship and ferry navigation through deep coastal channels. Because it was built on wood over a tidal zone, it was incredibly susceptible to fire. It suffered several devastating blazes. The final blow came when the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway bypassed the town entirely in favor of Prince Rupert. The economy instantly died. Without maintenance, the wooden boardwalks and buildings collapsed into the estuary. You cannot drive here. It is inaccessible by road and can only be reached by boat, navigating the same treacherous tidal currents the old fishermen braved. It is a place of relentless coastal rain, thick fog, and massive tidal shifts. The daily tides obscure and reveal the ruins. On abandoned cannery sites like Port Essington, almost no above-ground evidence remains today because the structures have rotted away or sunk. Nature has almost entirely reclaimed the site. At low tide, visitors and boats can see the geometric patterns of the old wooden pilings and scattered rusted machinery sinking into the mud. All you hear is the sucking sound of estuary mud, the cries of seagulls, and the rhythmic lapping of ocean tides against dead wood. The river built the town, and the river took it back. Number 4. Cassiar, the erased asbestos city. A thriving company-owned mining town that was so completely wiped off the map that the company auctioned off the houses and burned the rest to the ground. In the 1950s, asbestos was still considered a miracle mineral. Early prospectors noted that local birds used the fire-resistant white fluff to build their nests. The town of Cassiar was founded in 1952 to mine high-grade asbestos from McDane Mountain. It required a massive company town built in the extreme northern wilderness. This is remote, harsh subarctic alpine tundra in the rugged Cassiar Mountains. Brutal, freezing northern winters regularly drop below -30 degrees Celsius. The town produced over 4,000 tons of ore a day, which was trucked out via the grueling Cassiar Highway. By 1992, the world knew the deadly truth about asbestos. Global demand plummeted. The cost of transitioning to an underground mine was too high. The mine suddenly shut down. Rather than leave a liability behind, the company liquidated the town. When the town closed, houses were either sold off and trucked away on flatbeds down the highway, or intentionally bulldozed and burned to the ground by the company. They erased a town almost overnight. To find what is left, you face a long, desolate drive up the isolated Stuart-Cassiar highway, followed by a turnoff into a valley completely devoid of human infrastructure. Biting alpine winds whip across an empty, scarred landscape. Today, only a massive, stark white asbestos tailings pile, a Catholic church, an abandoned hockey arena, and 4 old apartment blocks remain. The tailings pile looms over the empty valleys, one of the largest in the world. The town's few remaining abandoned apartment blocks have recently been repurposed by modern gold exploration companies, who use the spooky, decaying buildings as makeshift bunkhouses for their geologists. It was a town destroyed to hide the evidence, leaving only a white mountain of poison behind. Number 3, Anyox, the town that poisoned itself. Anyox burned hot and fast. It was built in 1914 in a pristine coastal fjord to extract copper. The town's massive smelters operated with zero environmental oversight. It became a booming copper smelting hub. It produced so much toxic byproduct that the smelter smoke choked out all vegetation and the creeks ran with cyanide. The toxic plumes of sulfur dioxide rained down on the town, killing every tree, plant, and blade of grass in the valleys. It created an alien landscape known as the Poison Meadow. The snow was so contaminated with sulfur from the smelters that residents could allegedly light it on fire. When the copper market crashed during the Great Depression, the company simply walked away. They abandoned the town in the 1930s. They left behind a poisoned, apocalyptic wasteland. The surrounding mountains are still scarred and bare from decades of acid rain. Massive, haunting concrete brutalist structures like the powerhouse were left to rot. There is no road access. You must take a boat or helicopter deep into the treacherous observatory inlet. It is coastal rainforest weather, meaning the massive concrete ruins are constantly dripping with rain and creeping moss. A century later, the massive Anyox Dam, built in 1924, is still fully functional and holding back a massive reservoir. Energy companies are currently debating firing it back up to feed the BC power grid. It was the tallest dam in Canada at the time of its construction. The terrifying, violent roar of millions of gallons of water blasting through the relief holes of the unsupervised, century-old dam echoes through the fjord. The area is entirely abandoned but privately owned. The incredible isolation has protected the ruins from modern vandals. Sprawling slag heaps remain. There is a graveyard where headstones list causes of death ranging from Spanish flu to fell into a crusher. They built a machine to chew up the earth, and it swallowed them too. Number 2, Ocean Falls, the town of rain. Established in 1906 by Crown Zellerbosch. A pulp and paper mill became fully operational here in 1912. The location was chosen specifically because the pure, abundant lake water did not require treatment to make perfect white paper. It sits in a deep, sheer-walled fjord in the heart of the Great Bear Rainforest. Because it sits in a geographical bowl that catches coastal storms, it receives an absurd 4,390 millimeters of rain a year. It earned the nickname the Town of Rain. It is almost always overcast, damp, and dripping. The constant drone of waterfalls and rain hitting concrete dominates the valley. By the 1950s, it was a thriving, isolated utopia. Residents enjoyed a massive hotel, a hospital, and the largest indoor swimming pool in the province. But shipping costs from such a remote location were staggering. In 1973, the mill closed. Most residents had abandoned the town by 1980. The provincial government eventually bought the town. Realizing they could not afford to maintain a city with no economy, they forcibly evicted the remaining residents of the newer subdivisions. The government controversially bulldozed and burned a massive portion of the town, specifically the Martin Valley housing development, to avoid liability. To get there today requires a grueling 10-hour ferry ride from Bella Coola or a float plane flight through unpredictable mountain weather. There is a total absence of cars. Because Ocean Falls is so remote and wet, the sheer size of the decaying concrete hotel and mill buildings jutting out of the dense, dripping rainforest looks like the ruins of a lost civilization. The looming water-stained concrete facade of the abandoned multi-story Crown Zellerbach Hotel stands as a monument to failure. A tiny population still lives in the remaining houses, operating a lodge and a small power facility. The massive mill ruins in the giant hotel remain standing but are highly dangerous and decaying rapidly. You can burn down the houses, but the concrete simply waits for the forest to consume it. Number 1. Kitsault, the time capsule town. You drive to the end of a grueling logging road north of Terrace. You hit a heavy locked private gate. Beyond it, the air is crisp. You look across a broad level table of land with sweeping views of a stunning azure green coastal fjord. The unskied mountains are snow-capped, but directly in front of you are perfectly manicured, surreal suburban streets lined with 1980s split-level homes. The lawns are meticulously mowed. The streetlights are humming. You walk into a building, flip a switch, and the lights turn on. There is a terrifying, manufactured silence. No voices, no cars, no human movement. Just an empty town with the power running. In the late 1970s, a mining conglomerate named Phelps Dodge, or Anyox, needed to attract educated engineers and their families to the middle of nowhere. To do it, they spent roughly $40 million building a state-of-the-art 1980s suburban utopia to house workers for a massive molybdenum mine. They built over 100 single-family homes, 7 apartment buildings, a modern hospital, a shopping center, underground utilities, and even cable TV. The town opened in 1979. Just 18 months later, the global price of molybdenum crashed. The mine was closed immediately. The company did not gradually downsize. They simply locked the gates and forced everyone to leave. All residents were sent away. For over 2 decades, the town was padlocked and heavily guarded. This prevented vandals or media from entering. It never suffered the rot of typical ghost towns. In 2004, it was purchased by millionaire Christian Suthentheron for $7 million. He pays a live-in caretaker to mow the lawns, keep the lights on, and maintain the empty houses. Foxes and grizzly bears occasionally wander through the streets to eat fruit from the unpicked apple trees. The town is so perfectly preserved that the library shelves are still fully stocked, the hospital still has its 1980s medical equipment, and if you walk into the recreation center, the lights still turn on. Everything sits exactly as it was left in 1982. It is a pristine neighborhood patiently waiting for a population that is never coming back. British Columbia is vast, hiding its mistakes behind dense forests and sheer mountains. For me, it is Kitsault, a full town with the lights still on and no one inside. That one will stay with me. Which of these towns surprised you most? Did we miss an abandoned place you know about? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe for more places the map tries to forget.